From WFRV TV, Local 5, serving Northeast Wisconsin, including Green Bay, Fox Cities, and the Lakeshore. This is Newsmaker Sunday.
Good morning and thank you for joining us for Newsmaker Sunday. I'm Tom Zalaski. The impact of social media on children has been a growing concern for parents, educators, and health professionals. And this morning to talk about social media and kids and the impact is one of those health professionals, Dr. Tiffany Bourne, a pediatric psychologist from Amplify at Bellin Health. Dr. Bourne, good to have you this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of the issue at hand, the Dr. Tiffany Bourne story. How did you make your way up to where you are now, especially with your expertise in this area?
Sure. So I'm a Green Bay native originally, and I grew up here, went to Preble High School, and fell in love with school psychology there. Met with our school psychologist and loved it. So then I went on to get my undergrad at Ripon, grad school at UW-Madison, and then I went out to Boston and Baltimore for my training and some work before coming back home.
And as we get into this subject, I gotta believe that there are parents out there who are kind of feeling like failures because they don't know all this social media stuff. I mean, they're overwhelmed. They don't know what their kids know. They don't know what their kids are doing. Is it okay for them to feel that way? I mean, they're not alone, are they?
Well, if they're a failure, I'm a failure too, because I cannot keep up with all of the social media and with all of the different platforms. And our kids are so much more intelligent with technology in general than we are, so we can't be trying to fight against them in their knowledge. We have to be working with them. So they're not a failure for not knowing. It's just our generation. We don't know as much.
Okay, the issue is this serious. The Surgeon General declared that social media use among youth poses significant risks to their mental health as well as their well-being. I mean, do you agree with that? Is that this serious?
I absolutely agree with it.
You do.
And there are benefits as well. And I think if we go up to our kids and say, social media is terrible, you can't do it, we're just villainizing social media. They're going to not want to listen to anything we have to say. So we have to be able to see, yes, there are these risks. We need to be able to talk about it. But there are benefits as well. And it's going to be a part of most of our kids' lives as they grow up. So we have to figure it out.
Right, so you just kind of admitted you can't keep up. I know that I can't and couldn't keep up. So what about the parents out there? How are they supposed to possibly navigate all this when it seems there's something new every week?
There is. There are certainly resources out there for parents. They can look online for Common Sense Media, which will talk about different apps and some of the risks with some of those apps. But really most important is talking to your kids. Ask your kids, what are you on? How does this work? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? And having that conversation early before there's a problem is going to make it a lot easier to address if anything does come up.
Okay, big question. Everybody always wants to ask out there, when should a kid be allowed to have either that first smartphone or that first iPad? Is there an age, or is it depending upon the kid and his maturity level and their family?
Yeah, I get asked that all the time.
Yeah, I bet.
And I wish I had an age, but it's so dependent upon the family, the individual child, their maturity level, how well they can control their impulses, how well that you feel like they can talk to you if something comes up. So often I recommend starting with something that's a little bit easier to monitor, so maybe like a smart watch where they only have certain access, or a smartphone where you can see everything that's happening, and then gradually give more responsibility and privacy to the child. But the age is really going to depend upon the individual situation.
Yeah, and do parents feel some kind of pressure here? Because they say, well, my kid is going to start as early as possible.
Yes.
He or she is not going to get left behind because I see all those other kids who have all this stuff.
Yes, and we hear from our kids, well, everybody in my class has a cell phone, everybody has a smartphone. And I think it's that fine balance between, we're not just going to keep up with the Joneses and do this, 'cause if we don't think it's right for our family, we're not going to do it yet. And we have to respect that our children are going to feel kind of left behind, and we worry about them not getting kind of real world experience as well. So it's finding that sweet spot and that balance where everybody can be a little happy, even if they're not getting everything they want right away.
All right, we've got more help for you with Dr. Tiffany Bourne when we come back, so please stay right there. And welcome back to Newsmaker Sunday. Our guest this morning, pediatric psychologist Dr. Tiffany Bourne. We're discussing the effects of social media on kids, and you just brought it up in our last segment. Social media can be good? What do you see as the pluses for kids using social media?
Well, when social media is done right, it is a place for connection, for finding people who have similar interests, experiences. You can find support. You can learn about the world. So there are a lot of pluses to it.
Yeah, this is kind of like, again, these kids almost have to have it as far as just access to the immediacy of the information they can get their hands on.
Yes, absolutely. Even if it's not how we want the world to be, this is how the world is. So we have to have our kids be able to navigate that and to learn from the world around them.
Yeah, I mean, this is almost like in the old days when you didn't have a microwave, and now you do, and you go, how did I ever do without that thing?
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah. Moving on to the bad stuff. What do you see? What are some of the negatives about social media?
Well, the connection piece, that it can be a great thing, can also be a bad thing because we can get connected to people that aren't there for our best interests. You know, you can fake a profile. There can be lots of misinformation out on social media. You can also be connected to people who may say things that are not kind, cyberbullying, for instance, that they would never say to you in real life because they're behind that protection of a keyboard. So that can be really damaging for kids. And you're comparing your regular life with all of the mundane ups and downs to their highlight reels with filters showing just the best things and kind of making themselves look as good as that they can.
Yeah, cyberbullying. Tell me more about that. In the past decade and a half, I mean, are you seeing it in your practice? Are parents concerned about this?
Yes, I am. And I see it not only where I would have thought in like the platforms like Facebook, or kids don't use Facebook anymore, but those sort of platforms, but also on things like video games, that there's bullying going on these video games where you can be talking to one another. It can be very impactful for kids, especially kids who get a lot of their social identity in those online worlds.
What are these kids doing? What are the bullies doing? How do they bully somebody?
Yeah, they can attack people in any sort of way. It can be about their gameplay for the video games, but it could also be about how they look or their name or where they're from. If it's people from school, they can be bringing up things from school and just hounding. It can be relentless because they can't get away to a safe place.
Can this online usage lead to, let's say, anxiety or depression?
Yes, we know that social media use exacerbates anxiety and depression. It's not really clear the link there, if it's that when we're anxious or depressed, we go to social media more, or if using social media brings on the anxiety and depression, but we know that it makes it worse because we're seeing, again, that comparison and everybody else is doing so well and we feel like we are lacking. And that comparison just leads to higher levels of anxiety and feeling badly about ourselves.
Yeah, is social media sometimes like a security blanket? You just get attached to it.
You do, and even as adults, I think it's really important that we watch our own social media use and how often are we picking up the phone and just going onto those apps without even really thinking about it. I was on a vacation recently and I wasn't able to go on my apps and I just would pick up my phone and be like, oh, I can't do this, and I wasn't even thinking about it. It was mindless. So it just becomes that security blanket.
It's true. There is no worse feeling than driving to work and looking on the seat of your car and realizing, I forgot my phone.
Right. We're so reliant on them.
And it's, do I turn around and go get it, or do I just go this day without the cell phone, which seems like an impossibility. For kids, can this also lead to self-image issues?
Absolutely. And unfortunately, the algorithms feed more and more content that can make self-image issues worse. So if someone is worried about their weight, they're worried about how they look, and they start looking at influencers who are a certain model type, or they're talking about calorie restriction or talking about really significant exercise routines, they're going to get more and more of that content, and it can just make them feel worse and worse about themselves and really lead to poor behaviors.
So that's a catch-22. You're looking for information about how to not be what you are, and somebody's turning around and making fun of you for that.
Absolutely, and trying to sell you something, right? I think that's something I talk to teens about all the time is these people are trying to get something out of it. They're not just doing it out of the goodness of their heart in most cases. So we have to always be looking for what is that ulterior motive behind this content.
All right, one of the worst case scenarios usually happens in adults, but kids too, stalking. Is that an issue?
Yes, and I think it's really important to talk to kids about what information can and should be shared online and what information cannot be shared online. And then even more importantly than that is telling kids, come talk to me if something happens. Because too often I see that kids getting themselves in a situation and then they feel guilty and that mom and dad are going to be so mad, so they don't want to tell mom and dad about it, and then it just gets worse and worse, and that can lead to really dangerous outcomes for kids and teenagers.
Our guest this morning, Dr. Tiffany Bourne, and we are talking about kids and the internet. Stay with us, we've got much more to come. Back now with Dr. Tiffany Bourne for Amplify Health at Bellin. We're talking about social media and the effects that it has on kids. We talked just a minute ago about people stalking or cyberbullying. What about the reverse? Can kids be ignored and feel badly about not being in the in crowd, so to speak?
Absolutely. I think one of the most harmful pieces of social media is that like button, right? And feeling like I don't have as much attention or as much followers.
Yeah.
I put this picture up and it wasn't good enough, and now I'm not getting as many positive comments. And that comparison can make you feel isolated and like you're not enough.
Yeah, and the worst of all, and we've seen this in the news this week, as a matter of fact, children and suicide because of the internet.
Yes.
How big of a problem do you see that as?
One suicide is one too many.
Yeah.
And it is a big problem. It can be a problem because of that bullying. It can be a problem because of sextortion. So like we were talking about, when you get into trouble, you start sending pictures and then they threaten you that if you don't give money or if you don't do certain things, they're going to send it to all of your friends. Those can lead to those really dire situations.
And that literally has happened just in the past week.
Yeah.
I mean, national stories of these boys mainly.
Yes, yeah. We think about it with girls, but
Yeah.
it's very common in boys.
Yep, killing themselves just over.
That fear of embarrassment, right? And everybody's seeing this.
Yeah,
can
he
be
sent
really
the
hard.
picture that he shouldn't have sent, and he ends it. More in depth a little bit about how can parents, deal with their kids' exposure to social media?
Yeah, again, I think it comes back to having that conversation together. What is our family plan around this, rather than it just being the parents making the rules? Because like we were talking about, parents don't know all of the things. So what can we come up with as good, safe rules for everyone? And then we monitor it, we talk about it, and what that monitoring looks like could be different depending upon the age and the individual child. For someone young, it's probably looking at everything that they post or that they talk about. For someone a little bit older, it might be kind of check-ins, right? Or at least talking about the content. And I always tell teens, if you don't want your mom or dad to see it, you probably shouldn't be posting it online.
Yes.
So thinking about that from the get-go, but then realizing kids and teens don't have fully developed frontal lobes, so they're not going to be making the best decisions always. So we as parents still have to be there to kind of guide and support.
Modeling healthy behavior on the part of parents. But here's the deal. I see parents sitting in the restaurants and they just have their faces buried in that phone.
Yes.
There's the model.
Yes. I can't tell you how many times we have these conversations in my office and kids are like, well, what about you, Mom? What about you, Dad? I want you to put it down and talk to me. And parents can get a little defensive, and I get it, but it's okay. So let's talk as a family. We all could benefit from boundaries around social media. So what could that look like, and how can we come together to all work on it, rather than it being, you're the child, you can't do this?
What, in your practice, what are the parents telling you? What are their concerns?
Yeah.
What are they worried about?
Yeah.
What are the issues?
Parents are concerned that they don't have control. They don't feel like they know enough about all of the platforms and apps out there to have their kids be safe. They're worried that their kids are spending too much time on social media and too much time on electronics in general, and that they don't really know how to step in.
Yeah, and something we mentioned a few minutes ago, you hit upon this, and this is so true. This social media thing, it's even tough on adults, because I know that when I go on Facebook, I see everybody else with that perfect family.
Yes.
They're always on the most wonderful vacation in
Yes.
the world, or they're seated in this beautiful restaurant. And I look at all those pictures and I go, where did I go wrong?
Right.
I don't have that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, that comparison, it's normal for us to do that, to look around. But nobody posts their, I had an okay day today. Right? It's or I screwed up today at work. They just post their, I got a raise, or I'm going on this great vacation, or I had a new child who's just beautiful and healthy. So it can be really hard for even us as adults to realize that we're just looking at highlight reels rather than real life.
And kids face the same thing. They see their
Absolutely.
friends with the nice new dress.
Absolutely.
Or the vacation.
With all of these filters on that I will never know how to use,
Right.
because they have access to that, who maybe have taken 20 pictures before they put one on the social media app. So being able to kind of look back and be like, okay, that's not real life. That might be impacting me, but that's not real life.
I hear you, as someone who can't spell TikTok.
Right.
We are back to wrap up with Dr. Tiffany Bourne. Stay with us. We are back now to wrap up with Dr. Tiffany Bourne. We're talking about social media, its effects on kids. Wherever you go, you see these kids, our kids, on their phones constantly. What kind of an impact do you think that has on their social skills? Because when we were coming up, we maybe didn't have those devices. We actually had to communicate.
Yes. I think, again, it's a double-edged sword, because in some ways, talking online and being able to communicate online is the wave of the future. So our kids are probably better at that than we are. Right. But we do still need to be able to have those personal one-on-one conversations, know how to read a room, and know how to handle the discomfort of being in a social situation where you're not super comfortable yet, right? So it's so easy. I mean, I do it too. When I go into a place where I'm not comfortable, I don't know people, I go right on my phone so that I can be escaping that. But being able to handle, okay, I'm going to look around, I'm going to see if there's people to talk to, I'm going to start a conversation, is a skill that is really hampered if we're only attached to our phones.
Oh, there's that security blanket again.
It's the security blanket.
Always hide behind it. Yes. You know, the kids are texting with other kids. They're communicating in ways that we're just not used to. But they're losing out not just on social skills, but they're missing out on seeing somebody's body language.
Yes.
Or facial expressions, or vocal reactions. I mean, do we have a generation that's losing those skills?
Yeah. And I don't think it's just because of social media, it's also COVID, right? We had our kids often pulled from abilities to communicate with people in person. And so they have learned these other ways to communicate and have lost some of those skills, and it's more difficult for them. Now they can still get them, right? We can still work on them, but it's a little bit different and more challenging when you can just rely on social media or rely on communicating in other ways.
I got to believe it's a little bit of a tension-filled situation when a parent and child have to come to some sort of an agreement on limiting use.
Yes.
Is there a way to avoid the conflict?
Yes, yeah, it can be really challenging. What I found surprising, though, is when I ask kids, what do you think the limit should be? Usually kids tell me lower limits than what their parents would have said, because they know, and they might not like it, and they might still fight against it when it's time to kind of implement that. But kids know that too much social media or too much media is not great for them. And so if you come to it as a team, okay, let's figure out what this plan is for our entire family, oftentimes you'll get more success with kids being willing to try things or to put limits. Then talking about, let's just try it out. Let's have an experiment for this week of limiting our time to this and see how it feels, and then kind of checking in and can make changes as you go forward.
You know, there are already so many negatives and trouble kids can get into. Do you worry at all about AI? AI is a whole new ball game.
I do. You know, we talk about being able to look at information and judge whether or not it's true or not. And now with AI, there's so many different ways that information can be given to us, or that looks like people that are talking to us that it really isn't.
Right.
That's very hard for us as adults to judge, and we're expecting our kids to be able to do that. That's scary. And I know the kids that I work with are often talking about AI as well, and they might actually be a little bit more perceptive than I am to what is AI and what is not. So having those conversations and having those ideas of, okay, when you see something, where can you fact check it? Where can you look for additional information? Is really important conversations to be having.
Yeah, you know, parents have the best of intentions, and you might set limits, but you know, the kids, they're hardly at home these days. They're either in school, they're out with their friends, and they have these devices. Parents can't monitor that.
Yeah.
So how do you monitor that when they're gone?
Yeah.
You don't know what they're doing.
Right. There are ways to do so. There are different apps that you can get on your phone that can help monitor what's happening on other phones, to the point of seeing exactly what they say, or at least seeing how often they're on certain apps or what apps that they're on. But again, it goes back to that communication. At some point, they're going to be out of your house. You're not going to have control. So having that communication and being able to have a partnership with your child or teen so that they feel like they can talk to you when things come up, rather than that they're going to just be blamed or punished for something, is going to leave that open. So if something happens, they can come back to you.
In your practice, maybe not just specific to the social media question, what's the biggest issue facing parents and children today who come to you for help, advice?
think the biggest issue is trying to get kids to do the things that parents want them to be able to do, and in a way that everyone is happy with, right? Everybody feels like they're a welcome part of the family, that they aren't overly anxious, aren't overly sad about things, but that they're getting the things done that parents think are important for them, like getting their homework done, doing chores, doing things that are enriching for them, like sports.
Parents, after they come to you, do they kind of breathe a sigh of relief, like, oh, we can do this?
I think it's usually the most sigh of relief when I say, oh yeah, I deal with that too. So even though I have this knowledge, even though this is my training, that's hard. It's hard to be a parent, and you can have all of the skills and tools, but sometimes just knowing that other people are out there struggling too can really help you feel better.
Is it tougher these days for parents to get the kids involved in sports and theater and chorus because they have that device which kind of pulls them away from those things?
It can be, and I talk to parents and kids about how that's normal. These devices are designed to get our attention and keep our attention and be addictive. So it makes sense that that constant attention, that constant reinforcement is going to be more something that you're looking for than going to sports or something that's hard and you have to put the effort in, but the long-term reward is there. So we really want to be encouraging those other activities as well.
I think you've made a lot of people feel better about themselves.
I hope so.
Who are listening this morning, because again, as we said at the top of the show, parents are lost. Yeah. Especially with things happening so quickly.
Absolutely.
A new gadget, a new device.
Yes. There's no way we can keep up.
Right. No, you can't. No. Like I always tell my friends, I am so happy to have my 8-track tape player, and that's fine.
Yes, it works for you.
Dr. Tiffany Moore, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Much appreciated. And if you have a newsmaker in your town who you think we should have on the show, let us know about it. Send us an email to tips@wearegreenbay.com, or you can message us on Facebook. And be sure to join us once again, 7:30 Sunday morning. Have a great day.